2019 is over, and this was a great year for film as there were a lot of amazing films this year, particularly for endings to trilogies and sagas, as I thought that there were some really emotional goodbyes this year. And this video is not done by rating, but by my personal preferences and what I enjoyed or loved more. And there are a few films on this list that I haven't done reviews for, either because I didn't find time or wasn't in the right mood to review them when I first saw them. So do please leave a comment if you want a review for some of those films. First, I have a lot of honourable mentions because, like I said, this was a great year. My first honourable mention is Gemini Man, which is my drawn favourite thriller of the year with some stunning action sequences. My second is Marriage Story, which is one of the most heart-wrenching films I saw this year, with two absolutely out-of-this-world performances from Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was an obscenely entertaining creepshow of a gateway horror film. John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum, lots of fun, and that knife fight was my favourite action scene of the year, and I think it was for a lot of others. Alita Battle Angel, I thought it was a really fun sci-fi spectacular that I hope gets its sequel. Knives Out, yet another film that proves the brilliance of Rian Johnson, and another obscenely fun film this year. Ford v Ferrari, my other drawn favourite thriller, and a brilliant art versus industry drama. And my last and eighth honourable mention, Booksmart, a modern, authentic, moving and hilarious high school drama with two incredibly lovable leads, which was the funniest film I saw this year. In my number 10 spot is How to Train Your Dragon 3 The Hidden World. This is a trilogy I've grown up with, and I didn't realise its brilliance until right before seeing this new one. I rewatched the first two films, and I thought the first was good, just not great. But the second led me to tears with Hiccup and Toothless' relationship. And this one was something else. The way it used the two films' promise of a second Night Fury to bring an end to Hiccup and Toothless' relationship and journey together was astonishing. It was a beautiful film, and the last 10 minutes or so remained the most I've ever cried in a film. And is one of the emotional high points of the year in film for me, as I've never felt so much sadness and joy within such a small amount of time, and it's everything I could have asked for the end of this series, and for the end of Hiccup and Toothless' brilliant and long-lasting relationship. In my number 9 spot is Little Women. I had no familiarity with the novel and its characters, yet Greta Gerwig and her across-the-board perfect cast took me on a journey through the March Sisters' lives in a way no other supposedly period film has. The gorgeous cinematography and Gerwig's masterstroke in going back in time made me so wrapped up in the characters and their story, as though they were real people, which created the most joyous and truly wonderful film I had seen in a long time. In number 8, some of you may be surprised by this, I have Glass. There were some really high stakes in this film for me. Unbreakable, the first of this trilogy, is in my top 2 absolute favourite films of all time, and Split introduced an incredibly compelling character in James McAvoy's Kevin Wendell Crumb. Yet this succeeded, and wildly so. Whilst the first 2 acts are very good, if not incredible, the film really comes into its own in the third act, where there is one sort of out of nowhere twist, but other than that, M. Night Shyamalan gave me the perfect emotional payoff to 3 of my favourite characters of all time in David Dunn, Elijah Price and Kevin Wendell Crumb. And in turn, it led to 10 straight minutes of tears for me, as well as me stumbling out of the theatre in absolute amazement. I thank Shyamalan so much for creating one of my favourite trilogies of all time, and with Glass, one of my favourite trilogy cappers of all time. In number 7, I have Avengers Endgame. Who wasn't excited for this? But who also wasn't nervous that it couldn't deliver a satisfying end to the Infinity Saga? But yet again, Marvel did it, and in turn created the biggest film of all time at the box office. Every plot strand was wrapped up, every 10-year arc was finished. The Russo brothers and their cast, on top of all of this, still delivered an incredibly entertaining adventure that is one of the best in the MCU, and made me and every Marvel fan worldwide so outrageously happy. And I remember when I first saw the film thinking that it was Marvel's great big thank you for going on that journey with them and their characters for the last 10-11 years. In number 6 is Ad Astra. I didn't get what I thought I would going into this film, but I was taken on a journey with Brad Pitt's character that was one of the most poignant and beautiful cinematic journeys I've ever been on. Brad Pitt really deserves to be recognised for his work here, as his performance alone took me on an emotional journey, as his character changed from twitches to tears, whilst travelling through the vast, empty expanses of space that was stunningly captured by James Gray. This is an emotional journey for me, and one that I will never forget, as this is a true example of cerebral sci-fi, and sci-fi as a whole, at its absolute best. At number 5, this may be a controversial one, I had Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. I became a fan of Star Wars in the build-up to The Force Awakens, and I quickly became a die-hard fan as soon as my interest started to develop in the series. And this series I hold very near and dear to my heart, and I loved the characters of Rey, Kylo and Ren in this sequel trilogy, especially Ren, and I just couldn't wait to see how their stories finished in this. No matter what any toxic fan says to me, I absolutely love this and the way it ended everything. Rey and Kylo Ren get very fitting endings for each other, and that second half gave me everything I ever could have wanted and more as a Star Wars fan, with thrilling action, a riveting story, and one older character's brief return in particular made one of my favourite scenes in Star Wars ever. J.J. Abrams had to finish the monumental Skywalker saga, and yet somehow he did it to riveting and emotional and absolutely ecstatic and joyous effect for me. At number 4, I have Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. This was my first Scorsese experience, and he is already a master of the craft in my mind. I knew he already was from other people, but he now definitely is for me. This was one of the most thoughtful and emotionally impactful films I've ever seen. The way the film's full extended runtime was used to build up to a devastating and soul-crushing final 45 minutes that reflected on ideas and themes such as how the loss of humanity and people who love and care for us destroys a human as well as their soul, as well as our own mortality and need to be loved, was unlike anything I've ever seen. The Irishman was some of the best 3 hours and a half of my life, and one that I would happily rewatch over and over again, as it is truly one of the best films I've ever seen. At number 3, this won't be a surprise to many of you, I've put Toy Story 4. I gave this a 9.5 when I first reviewed it, and it's the only review that I've done on this channel that I wish I could change to a higher grade, as I had only seen the film once when I reviewed it. When I saw the film again about a month and a half later, knowing the ending, it was a completely different film, so much so that when the ending came on that second viewing, having noticed how they built it up throughout the film, I was driven to absolute tears, and the same happened again on my third viewing. This is another franchise that I've grown up with like Star Wars, and this is the best ending to a character story I've seen this year. It is beautifully animated, as always, by Pixar, as well as voiced by the cast, especially Tom Hanks, and it truly, truly deserves to get the Best Animated Picture win at the Oscars this year. And this is a film that just gets better with every viewing, and I know will continue to get better. We, or at least I, thought that Disney forced Pixar to do this. Yet it turned out to be a sincere goodbye to one of Pixar's most iconic characters, and one of the best animated films I've ever seen. In my runner-up spot, I have Joker. Joker is now the crown jewel of comic book films, at least in my opinion. Joaquin Phoenix was utterly transformative and deserves the Oscar for this, and the way that he used his character's descent into madness to make a completely different character to Arthur when he put on the makeup was something so incredible, I simply can't put it into words, and it was almost scary in fact. It was brilliantly directed by Todd Phillips, and the way he used the camera, especially towards the end, to make you feel as though you were going insane with the Joker, was something else. And also, due to Phillips' use of the camera, this is the only film where its violence has really shocked and affected me right to my core. Hilda Goodnatity's score deserves the Oscar for this year, and is one of my favourite scores of all time now, as the film wouldn't be the same without it. But it's ultimately how the film makes you feel for Arthur Fleck, until you feel shock and despair at how he changes, that makes it so good. As it felt like a tragedy, and at that, the best tragedy I've ever seen in film, whilst remaining loyal to the Joker and Batman world from the comics, as well as Joker's iconic character in the comics. Joker is a truly incredible character study that lingers long in the mind, and I won't be forgetting Joker soon. However, it was beaten by one film, one you likely don't know about and that I didn't find time to review when I saw it, but I raved about it to absolutely everyone I could when I saw it, and that film is Apollo 11, which is my number one film of 2019. This was a limited release film that was advertised as a documentary and received huge praise from every critic, and it was playing in a theatre near me in early July, so I went to go see it as I was really intrigued what all the reviews were about. And oh my goodness, I wish I could have seen this in IMAX. It is a deceptively simple film, and you wouldn't expect it to be my favourite of the year based on how simple it will sound. The idea of it is that the filmmakers were given access to hours upon hours of unseen audio and footage from NASA from the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. There's no talking heads, no narrator, just footage and audio to try and relive that monumental moment in human history. And it most certainly does relive that. It is the only film this year that I can say truly felt like an experience to see in theatres, and that won't be the same anywhere else. And despite the advertising, it's definitely not a documentary, but needs the Oscar in that category because it transcends being a film. I wasn't watching a screen. I was one of the Americans watching the rocket launch from a distance. I was one of the men in mission control stressing about their mission's survival and success. I was one of the astronauts in their rocket fearing for their life and overjoying when they actually got to the moon and got home. I learned things I never knew, such as how criminally underknown Michael Collins is as the pivotal third astronaut in the mission, and much more which I don't want to give away if you don't know it. Matt Morton's score is about the only thing that they make themselves and add to the film, but adds to the transcendent experience, and the director, Todd Douglas Miller, has to be praised for how much time he and his team must have spent combing through audio and footage to find the right stuff, as well as new stuff for us to be amazed at. The real reason this is my number one, though, is because it is a testament to the power and beauty of cinema. This reminded me of how incredible an achievement this was, and that this can't be taken for granted, as well as how incredible the human race is for being able to do something like this, as well as how incredible this event was for helping to unite the world and bring it together in the face of such an amazing achievement. It is a reminder of why I fell in love with film when I was simply 4 years old, and for that reason, it is my number one of 2019 and one of my favourite films of all time. Absolutely go and seek out Apollo 11, as I promise you it will be worth your time and will be unlike anything you've ever seen. Those are my favourite films of 2019, guys. Again, if you want to comment for any of those that I haven't reviewed, especially Apollo 11, please do say, as I will try and find time to do a review. And there was a lot of stuff I loved this year, and I would recommend you try and check out everything on this list, including my honourable mentions. If you agree, disagree with my list, please tell me in the comments, and please recommend some films you thought I missed out that you think are worth being on this list. Those are my favourite films of 2019, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.